and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson. I started the podcast off the back of the work I do in my company, Wilkinson Accounting Solutions. We're an accounting and consultancy firm that specialise in helping businesses maximise their value on exit and acquire businesses with an ultimate mission to build generational wealth here in the UK. So I'm really excited today to have Luke Winter with me. Hi, Luke.
Hello. Great to be here.
Luke's really stepped in to help me. I had a few cancellations of guests, so Luke stepped in as a last minute guest. But the reason I saw Luke and invited him to come on the podcast is he's quite recently sold out some of his shares in a company to a business partner. And one of the things we've done here on the Build and Exit is had lots of guests with real life examples to show the truth behind, you know, selling and buying businesses isn't always as sexy as it's made out online. There's lots of things personal and emotionally that go into sort of buying and selling businesses. And we'd never had a guest come on that actually talked about the sell side within a business in terms of actually selling to another business partner. We've had it on the acquire side. And then Luke popped up in my feed and we had quite a lot of conversations, and I felt the story would really benefit, you know, a lot of sellers in the UK just from you sharing your experience. And Luke, really, especially the emotional side of selling, because I think it's something a lot of people look at a transactional side a lot, but they don't always look at the personal side of how it feels when you've built something and then let it go. So I really want to thank you for coming on and hand over so you can share a bit about yourself and why you wanted to come on the podcast.
Yeah, as I say, I think it was perfect timing, wasn't it? You needed a guest, and then I've just gone through this process. So, yeah, hi, I'm Luke. I'm a creative director, writer, and filmmaker, and for the last decade, I've co-run a video agency called Wallbreaker. We've worked with global brands, celebrities, everything in between, including comedy sketches, and somehow won awards for some of that work. I started the business 12 years ago with a best mate straight out of university. We built it from the ground up, had to learn to be businessmen along the way, which is difficult. And yeah, for the last sort of 12 to 18 months, I've been thinking about leaving that business, and that's recently just happened. So I've sold my half of the company to what was my business partner, and I'm now in a situation where I'm figuring out what's next, a bit of reflecting, and that brings us to today.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the fact that you started the business out of university, I mean, that's quite an entrepreneurial spirit to have there. I don't know if you've listened to the recent podcast with Diary of a CEO with Daniel Priestley, and it's a massive one, isn't it, that's going around. And, you know, Daniel talks a lot about entrepreneurs and how business is changing and people's brands is changing, and you're kind of in that sort of marketing space. So when you started the company, had you grown up around entrepreneurs? What made you start a business from university?
Do you know, we kind of just fell into it. I mean, the only entrepreneur that I knew personally at the time, bear in mind I was 21, was my uncle. He'd had his own business doing some project management for construction stuff. So it really wasn't something that I aimed to get into at all. My passion was filmmaking, and my particular course at university, it kind of set you up to leave the industry and go and make teas and coffees in London for people that with a lot more experience. So during our time at university, we started making corporate videos over the summer when all of our other fellow students would go home for the summer. And we realized that we were pretty good at it, so we just decided to give it a whirl, doing it ourselves. So then we kind of fell into it, really. So that initial first 5 years or so of like learning how to run a business was it was a huge learning curve.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating. I like hearing people's backstories about how they got into things, and I think I believe our education system, isn't that fit for purpose these days, because the world is changing. AI's come in, technology's come in, and the skills we need now to, make money and live our lives is different to what it used to be. But I don't know if me and my husband, we're foster parents. So we see different children in the educational system. And yeah, I don't think it has changed that much from when I was at school. It doesn't seem to, but honestly, it needs to change. So it's always interesting to hear like why people go into this sort of business owner route, other than kind of just going into a traditional job, I think.
Yeah, and I can really relate to you mentioned Daniel Priestley there. I've met him a couple of times actually, and when he talks about the school education system not gearing you up to be an entrepreneur and it teaching you that exactly what you just said there, you're designed to go into a job and work 9 to 5, and I think in today's landscape, especially like the agency world and what I do, that there's so much opportunity for you to be able to work anywhere and build a business and actually try something yourself. But we're still not taught that. I really don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. So, you started the business. You've had your years of success in it, and then obviously you started to decide, you wanted to try other things or whatever the reason was. What I'm interested in, because the reason I wanted you to come on was I know you talked to me a bit about, it is hard to let go of something that you've built. Obviously, when you've done something for, over 10 years, some people have said selling businesses is like losing a child, like literally to me when they've done. So, I'm quite interested to know the emotional side of when you sort of made the decision, like how did you decide eventually that you could go through with that? And, how did it impact you personally? Were you happy to share?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been through a divorce, but whenever I've described it to anyone, they've kind of said it sounds like you're going through a divorce. So, yeah, emotionally it was really difficult actually, and I struggled to find anyone that I could talk to about selling my business that I could relate to. It was quite a lonely experience actually, and it's, as you know, having spoken to all your other guests, these things take ages. We didn't think it would take as long as it did, but it still took the best part of probably 6 months of, before it actually happened. So yeah, emotionally it had an impact. It was really draining. I guess the thing that led me to that decision was I love making content, videos for clients, but I guess with Wallbreaker, I felt like I'd reached a bit of a glass ceiling. We'd never niched the agency into one particular sector. It was always just kind of generic video content. And I felt like if I didn't sell the business, I could kind of visualize the next 10 years of my life looking the same. Because I was kind of in a situation where for at least the last 5 years, I felt like I've lived in the same house, done the same routine, making the same kind of content, working with the same kind of clients. And that's not to discredit the work or the industry or anything like that. But I was just felt like I was really ready for a change. And if I didn't make that change now, then I don't know if that I ever really would have done. And I remember we were midway through the process, it was coming towards New Year. And, you get all those people that are like, New Year, new me, new resolution. And that was really, that was a really dark time for me because like it felt like I wanted to hit the ground running to sort of start changing my life and the routine and to try and start growing from like the 1st of January, even though it's just a day, isn't it? But it's so fixated on, a new path for people. But I was only halfway through the process. We were still sort of negotiating the amount and what we were going to do with the business and stuff. So yeah, it was really difficult. And I actually felt like I was in a really sort of like stagnant place for months, really.
Yeah. And I definitely think, but this is why I think it's so powerful, because in the end, all business owners go through this sort of mentality. All people in all different situations. I mean, I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of self-reflection. I journal every single day, and I think, and there's a guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a sort of like a holistic doctor, I suppose you might call him, whatever the terminology is. And they talk a lot about, if you want to change, there has to be a new you. You do have to change. You do have to. One of the things I did when we became foster parents, because we didn't have our own children, so it was a big change for us. I knew that obviously when you have a child in your life, you need a lot more flexibility. So one of the things that we went through a 9-month registration process, and one of the things that I did for myself was every single week I do one thing out of my routine every single week. because nothing to do with business necessarily. It could just be I walk the dogs at a different time of day, or I go swimming, or I do a different class. Like, for instance, I usually go to yoga on a Monday, and I didn't feel that well on Monday. I didn't sleep very well on Sunday. So rather than forcing myself to go, so my mind then just told me, oh, I'll just go next Monday. But on Tuesday, I realised, well, actually, I've got a pretty spare day today. I'm just going to go. So I actually went and did stretch and relax, or stretch and mobility on a different day. So things like that seem quite small, but actually it is hard as a person to move yourself out of a routine and into new things. And I think that happens in life and in business as well.
Yeah, 100%. And, all of those things were, to be honest, they made sense, and I'd heard other people say try and change up the routine, but I was so fixated on this exit that it was quite difficult to focus on anything else. I think relationships and friendships suffer because I was just so fixated on it. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, as I said, I didn't necessarily dislike the industry or anything. It was so overwhelming, this sort of feeling to do something new,
No, well, I think it's great. I think it's great when people acknowledge the way they feel and take those steps to change, because it is hard to change. It's the big thing. And I speak to so many owners through acquisitions, through this podcast, and just through clients and things. And so many people are scaling, small and big scales. But I hear the same things from everybody that, it's, well, I was going to go to the gym this morning, but I couldn't because my team did this, or my client did this, or my whatever did this. And it's like, well, actually, you have to take control of your own life. If you want to move forward and succeed in whatever that is yourself, you have to, stop making the excuses, I suppose, at a point, and take the control back and do what you do. And I see it at all stages. And I think my experience of speaking to people that are looking at selling businesses, often people wouldn't have the courage to actually go through and do the shares, because the change involved in the lifestyle change and the mindset change to actually take action like that is pretty big. I don't think you realise how big a thing that actually is.
No, not at all. And, I was looking at, and I've given up that regular income, I've given up that routine. I've given up working with certain clients and suppliers and all that sort of stuff. So it's such a daunting thing to walk away. But at the same time, it's now sort of blank canvas, and I think that's worth bearing in mind when you're weighing up giving away a company. It's what you can then go on to sort of achieve. But yeah, I can 100% relate to the impact on routine. Like I do it now. I feel the most creative when it comes to writing first thing in the morning, but at the same time, I like going to the gym first thing and getting it out of the way, and then you try and do it over lunch, but things come up and you've got meetings and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, routine is it's important, and it's mad how much this sort of stuff, buying and selling has an impact. I know it did on my business partner as well. He told me the same thing. He was sort of like exhausted and things like that, of just the mental fatigue, because there was no big fallout between the two of us either. It's worth noting that no big drama exit. It was just both of us were just ready to try something new. We had different visions for the company and what we wanted to do. The business has done, as a video agency, we've done some amazing work, and I'm sure he will continue to do amazing work with the clients as he moves it forward. But for me, it was just, yeah, it's really difficult to get my head around the desire to just do something new, but not have anything like formal or structured in place. Like, I think some people would probably think it's a bit of a crazy, wild move to do, but yeah, small changes to my routine just weren't really doing it. It needed to be this big sort of clean blank canvas.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you felt a bit lonely through the process, which is interesting, because I know you did have some advisors on board, coaches and accountants and things. What do you think made you feel lonely? Was it because you didn't have anyone else that had actually sold to speak to?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Or the people that had sold that I'd maybe been aware of had done so for millions and millions, and that wasn't my case. Wallbreaker is a small a small creative agency. So yeah, the stories of people selling their businesses, they weren't people that I could, just sort of drop a message to. And what they had done was just, it was much bigger scale. So, but yeah, it's difficult to speak to my girlfriend, because as much as she's there, great as a listening ear, she can't really advise on what's best to do because she's not really in that entrepreneurial situation. My friends do totally different things. One of my best mates is our video editor, so there was like a conflict of interest. I couldn't necessarily talk to him about it because he was at the same time an employee. So yeah, it was a really isolating experience. As much as your family are there for you as well. I think I should give a shout out to my mum because I think I called her every day just giving her updates and things like that of what was going on. But again, none of these people, it felt, as much as they were there for me emotionally, they weren't able to talk through and necessarily advise me. So that's why it felt quite lonely. Yeah. And it's so, I can't tell you how much of a weight feels like it's been lifted now. Most of my time, I'm kind of just sitting at home thinking and pondering what's next. But to not have that stress of, the back and forth, am I making the right decision? What happens if A, B, or C happens instead? Am I going to regret this decision and giving up a lot? It's a nice weight to be rid of. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I know we had some conversations about it, and I think the due diligence process is always scary for every seller, or most people just say they're absolutely exhausted and by the time they come. And I know that you mentioned about that. So how did you, and you were selling to people you knew as well. So therefore, it's interesting, is it? If you're selling to people and you're still exhausted, you feel like that. Imagine how people feel when they're selling to independent parties, when they don't know them. So what were there last minute hiccups in the deal? Did things go to plan, or was there back and forth all the time?
There was so much back and forth, yeah. We weighed up some initial options when both of us decided that something needed to change. And we had a bit of a direction that we were going in. And then that direction changed a couple of months later, and then a new direction came in. And then just to the point where we thought we'd agreed on a deal. Even in the last week, there was a hiccup. And it was one of the most stressful weeks of my life. I think that expression of it taking years off you, but it really felt like it. I remember one night I was just sat at home in the shower, but sat in the shower, just sort of because I just couldn't think of anything else. It really was exhausting. It felt like the whole thing had, wasn't going to happen all of a sudden, but it did. And coming out on the other side now, I feel much more positive and refreshed, and I'm excited for what's next. But yeah, I think I believe that selling and buying businesses is often looked at from the outside as usually, I guess, a thing associated with positivity. And I think something positive has come out of this, but we really don't hear about the mental stresses that it can take. And as I said earlier, it really overpowers your life. There's nothing else. I felt like I was neglecting my relationships, my hobbies. Everything was this for the past few months. And it doesn't sound like a long time, but it felt like an age,
Yeah, no, I know. And, we've seen it from both sides because we've worked with buyer and seller on deals. And I think there's so many, it is an exciting journey. It is exciting because in the end, if you organically grow a business, it's hard work anyway. So, you don't get away from the hard work, whether you organically build a business or you acquire a business or you eventually sell the business. There's always some hard work that goes into it. But, there's a lot of courses and things teaching people, oh, it's exciting. You can go and do this, you can sell, you can buy this. But the reality of where the UK is for exits, most sellers, it's not a fun, easy sing and dance and sell in a few weeks. One, because the seller is often not set up to sell. And if you're selling, people that are selling to known parties, it doesn't actually always make the transaction easy, because in the end, people often still want to, for the people acquiring, it's still their money, it's still their life, isn't it? For the people selling, it's, their share in their life. But then when you sell into independents, people have even less support because they don't have that. So I see it from both sides, and it's very stressful for people. And I find, and I don't know, and I'm not just saying it is because of the courses where people are being taught to buy with no money down and all this sort of thing, but what I see is people get really excited. They call it deal heat. So they get like deal heat when they're going to buy, especially people looking at lots of deals. So they go and speak to the seller, and there's a lot of handshake agreements going on. Oh yeah, it's worth this. I'll pay this. I'll pay this. And people move to heads of terms with advisors or without advisor, whatever it is. And but then what happens is people start to get scared because they start to feel, oh, this is real. At this point, they're now forking out thousands and thousands on advisors, legals, and DD, and all this, and things start coming out of the woodwork. And they get to the point where I actually think people just start thinking, oh my God, is this viable? And the nerves start kicking in. This is what I see on all size deals transactions, whether it's multi-millions or whether it's smaller deals. I've seen it on all sizes and scales. And people do then start to think, oh, is this right? And what often then happens is numbers come out in due diligence that weren't there at the handshake at heads of terms. And now buyers feel in this place where they're, well, I've got to buy this business now. I've signed heads of, oh God, what if I walk away? I'll be seen as this, And sellers are thinking, oh God, I just want out. Probably how you felt, I just want out. They've got to just go. And then collisions happen because buyer needs to renegotiate, seller's exhausted because they've got to give all this information. And the reality is, not having a party in between to help. That's what we kind of do when we do our acquisition consultancy, is that party in between, talking financials to people, making sure everyone's on the right page. Because in the end, the biggest fallouts happen, I think, at finalization, when one party's trying to change the deal. One party's trying to change the deal. The other party doesn't understand why. They didn't really understand the things from the beginning, and now it comes to heads and it collapses. So that's just it doesn't matter what the size of the deal, who the people are, they are typically the reasons we see the transactions falling down. We haven't had many transactions fall down on our side because we find that obviously we have that relationship to advisor, but where people don't have the right advisors on board as well, it's even worse because they're trying to do it themselves.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. The bit you said there about that last week, where it feels like it's the most important part of the deal, and it's where the things do tend to sort of feel like they're going to fall apart. That's certainly what happened to us. It was that last week we were sort of really reassessing the structure of the deal. There were times where I guess I thought I felt like the deal was going to fall through, but then there were times where I also thought, am I walking away with not enough, or is Ash walking away with not enough? So and they really come to light, as you say, from a buyer and a seller perspective in that final week when it becomes a lot more real and this is about to happen. It really plays on your mind. But ultimately, both of us walked away with a deal that we're really happy with, and both of us in a situation now where we can focus on running. Ash can really focus on running the business, and I can focus on what's next. Because I think that's one other thing I'll say is that when it comes to this, buying and selling a business, and I think we've spoke a lot about the emotional toll that it has on the buyer and seller. But is that we felt like we weren't actually focusing on the business enough during that time period. Especially as a small team, where we were responsible for pitching work, looking after clients, actually making the video content, editing it, looking after the team. And it really does take an effect on the day-to-day operation, especially in a small team when everyone wears so many hats. We really felt like that was another reason it needed to be done that week, and it couldn't be extended because I think ultimately the business might have started to suffer for it.
Yeah, and that is common, Luke. Like I've seen businesses that have. I actually put some content on about it actually the other day because I put a lot of content on LinkedIn as well. I've seen businesses that are sort of 20 million turnover, and they go through this. Often bigger firms are getting approached by PEs. Like private equity companies, but a lot of sellers don't want to always go to PE firms because, owners are quite ethical and they care about their staff and they care about their customers. And I think a lot of them do feel that private buyers will take better ownership or better care of the thing. Whether what's true, you do get private equities that are good as well, but this is just generic conversations in the market. But anyway, I've seen businesses where they're 20 million, they get approached by PEs, they start asking for information and the seller doesn't have it. It's quite common. Private buyer, all PEs. Now you're going to look at 6 months to get data together. People are willing to wait. In that time, bang, large contract went 25%. Well, I think there was about a 25% contract that basically was at risk, which highlighted that they didn't actually have firm contracts in place with their clients. So now they've dropped one contract of 25% in the 6 month period. So obviously it's changing the valuation. But what it's then done is it's highlighted a risk. Well, if that one's gone, and actually when they then went into review sort of their current operational process, like what their risks and what they had in place, it actually highlighted that 75% of their business was custom was actually at risk, of which what had happened with this one customer could happen within a 12-month period of these other customers. It doesn't mean it would, but those types of things are very stressful because one, it is where buyers will pull out. PE firms may not pull out because they may have things they can collapse onto, but they'll just get a good deal and the seller will walk away with nothing. Private buyers likely to pull out because they'll just be like, this is too much risk. I can't pay for this business. And this is where the long earn-out clauses come in, where people end up selling with long earn-outs because buyers are saying, no, well, if you want that amount to sell, you've got to show me that you can turn this around and put these things in place. And so what you're saying there, I see it all the time, sort of large and small deals, because the operational risk associated to the deal is why a deal will collapse and why the numbers end up changing at the end, because people find things out like this. And obviously, the longer the DD goes on, the more risk, which is why I'm on a mission to help sellers get more prepared for exit. Because like if you had a structured finance team and a structured month end, none of these things would be a problem, because as soon as the buyer comes and says, show me the information, within a few weeks, you'd have the information, and they'd still do their DD. But they have professional advisors they can speak to, because the seller isn't a professional advisor often. They're knowledgeable, the CEO of their company, but they're not a jack of all trades. They're not a finance professional. They're not a legal professional, and that's what buyers are looking for when they're speaking to the sellers.
Yeah, and I also think also from a seller's perspective, you mentioned there about contracts falling through, and it, equally, we were kind of in the opposite situation. In the build up towards the buyout, we'd actually secured some huge contracts. So I was there thinking it really highlighted what I was walking away from, like a really large client, really large contract, and a lot of opportunity going forward to still service that client. And obviously, then you feel like as a seller, you're then maybe walking away with, you're gambling a lot more, because you especially like my business, and it was great to see us working with this particular client on this type of project, and that and hopefully it will for Ash, moving forward, will become a more permanent thing. But it kind of played on my mind like, am I going away with the right amount? But the emotional toll of the rest of it, just sort of thought, this is the right time. The business has experienced, agencies do this all the time, lots of feast and famine cycles, and I was so burnt out by all of it. Even though it was great to have this thing at the last point, there was hurdles that you go over, and the emotional roller coaster. So it was the right time.
But it's common, Luke, because at the end of the day, you've made it. You didn't walk away from the business because you didn't like the business. You wanted to sell the business because your own personal, how you wanted something else in your life. And it's normal for obviously people to think both ways, or what could I be missing out on, but not, or what could I lose? And that's natural, because you built this business and you love it, and you've obviously had a good relationship with your business partner. So having those feelings is natural, because it's the human element of the sale, isn't it? You love your business, you like your staff, you like your partner, you love your clients, and you weren't walking away because of any of those problems. And then when you see more clients coming through the door, which is obviously what you expect because you've grown a good business, it's natural to think, oh my gosh, should I be walking away from this? But I don't think, and that's where I think it's great that you did take away your emotions to the transaction, because the business is good, which is why you've had it for 12. Not many people, a lot of people will fail at 5 years, Luke. So to keep a business for 12 years is actually really good anyway. So the business was obviously stable and good, but you just decided that as a person, there's other things, other ventures you wanted to do. And that's why I wanted you to come on the podcast, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have taken that step, because they would have seen the growth and they would have just gone, oh, well, maybe if I just stay another 2 years, I can just get it to this, or I can just get it to that. But as a person, when is enough enough? Do you know what I mean? As an emotional side of things for you.
And I think it's worth noting that I also was that person. I couldn't really sit here honestly and say I hadn't thought about it for the past couple of years. And it was the familiarity and the security of this is what I've known. It's the only job that I'd had other than being a lifeguard before university. It was the only thing that I'd really done. So, it was a huge risk. But I was that guy. I was for a couple of years. What if we do this? What if we do that? But then I just kind of, in the past 12 to 18 months, realized that it wasn't really achievable with my mindset and my energy and my desire to sort of to break through and do something different.
Yeah. Well, I think it's brilliant, Luke, that you took the plunge and did what you needed to do. And I'm really pleased that you decided to come on and share, because, I know it's quite recent for you as well. So, and just one final thing then. What are you doing at the minute now you sold? Have you had some nice time off?
Not yet. I've been I feel like I haven't really stopped yet, but that's my plan. Yeah. I've got a bit of a safety net now to be able to go away, spend a bit of time reflecting on the last 12 years. Cause, there was a guy that I met recently who actually had a very similar scenario. He sold his video agency and he jumped straight into something new. And he just said to me, take the time, even if it's just a couple of months, to just sort of reflect. So that's what I'm going to do. I want the next thing that I go into to be full of energy and get that creativity and drive back into it. And I think I'm going to sit with my feet up somewhere like Thailand or Bali or something, and ultimately figure it all out. Yeah.
Oh, well, enjoy. And thanks so much for coming on and sharing. And I just want to thank our listeners. If you do love the show, hit the subscribe button so more people can find the channel. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.